Well, metaKnyts Media, a blockchain media company, announcing the release of its metaKnyts. That's a cryptographic digital comic series. With us now to discuss is Dele Atanda, the founder of metaKnyts and the CEO of MetaMe. Dele, it's so great to have you on the show. How did you get the idea for this crypto comic?
Thanks very much for having me. So we set up an NGO, a not-for-profit, back in 2013 to address digital human rights and the ethical use of data in commerce.
Okay, so what are digital human rights?
So this is basically about taking human rights and extending them into cyberspace. So they work great as a foundational set of principles, but as we go to this increasingly more digital world, we need to re-understand what those things mean in that context. And we think this is one of the biggest social issues of our age. Now, comic books have a history of being used to tackle really big social issues. So if you look at Captain America, for example, it was written to address the rise of fascism. And the X-Men was used to address tackle racism, which the Watchmen has carried recently. So we thought it was a great idea to actually create a comic series that could actually address these issues. And I know that that might sound dramatic to compare privacy and digital rights with racism and fascism, but we believe that the damage that the surveillance economy is doing to society is comparable with what the carbon economy is doing to the environment.
Wow. So who are the characters? What are the storylines, the plots? Who are the villains?
Excellent, great question. So it's set in this world called Digiterra, which is like a digital world that mirrors the physical world. And in that world, there are a group of FANG vampires, who are these cyber vampires who suck people's data.
Like, is that Facebook, Apple? Okay.
It's not accidental.
Right.
So the metaKnyts are a group of activists who are really trying to challenge that paradigm. There's basically a race to create an AI that will dominate the world, and the metaKnyts are trying to create a human-centered AI where we can have an economy that's a bit more driven by self-sovereignty and the principle of a free, independent self.
What is the decision that you want people to make after reading this?
You know, President Obama once said that change only happens when everyday people get involved and demand it. And when it comes to this issue of privacy and digital rights, we're getting legislation in place across the world. We see it in Europe with GDPR, CCPA and the like, that's putting the foundation there. But unless people actually go out and demand these changes and demand the behavioral, cultural changes and the commercial activities of companies, this won't happen. So what we're really aiming to do with metaKnyts is talk to young people specifically and get them interested in the cause in a way that they can understand, relate to, and then to demand, you know, better digital rights and a better data economy that's more inclusive.
Is there an answer also maybe in crypto, in blockchain, that the comic is also trying to address and educate readers on?
Absolutely, it's a fantastic question. So yeah, you know, one of the problems when you look at digital media and media generally is the issue that that digital media is easily replicable. So if you look at the music industry, Napster came about and disrupted the industry because it made music easy to replicate. And the problem now has resulted that we don't actually own any of our media, whether it's music, comics, gaming assets, etc., and they're all locked in these platforms. So crypto actually allows us to create a framework where we can actually own these assets independently of the platform. And so MetaMe's technology is really aimed to doing that with personal data generally, and we're extending it to the media space with metaKnyts.
I'm curious about your own personal data practices. What are you doing each and every day that the typical person who's not aware of what companies are learning about us based on what we're doing with our devices online? What are you doing?
So, I mean, I probably go further than most people. You know, with I use things like DuckDuckGo. I try and avoid...
So a search engine that doesn't
exactly, as a search engine that doesn't track you. I go through all my privacy controls. But I do actually think that's the wrong way of looking at it. You know, a lot of people sort of say people are dumb because they're sharing all their lives on Facebook and all of these things. But, you know, people are inherently social creatures. And that is not the problem. We shouldn't ask people to be less social. The challenge for technologists is to design technologies that make it easy for people to have a more private existence. And ultimately, at MetaMe, we believe that by giving people more privacy, we'll have more convenience. Because it's not fair to ask people to have a big cognitive overload in terms of what they do because the technology is exploiting them.
All right, more privacy equals more explain that. It almost sounds counterintuitive.
It does, and that's the issue. Now, but the thing is, if you have more control and more agency over your data, and you can control who has access to it and how it's accessed, all the research shows that you will share more information. If you know that information is not going to be used in a way to exploit you, then the chances are you will share more, especially if it brings you more benefit, more value, and more convenience.
All right, I like it. Dele, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much for
Dele
having me.
Atanda is the founder of metaKnyts and the CEO of metaMe. Thanks again.
Thank you.